Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Pixley for President. My name is Jared Pixley, candidate for president in the 2028 election. First off, I'd like to welcome all of our new subscribers. I want to say thank you for joining us here. If you want to support my campaign, there is a link in the box below for campaign donations as well as all my social medias. You can also go to my website and subscribe to my monthly newsletter for more information. Since this is the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, I thought today would be a great time to go over the Constitution and discuss the separation of powers between the President and Congress. Especially since certain people currently in the White House don't understand that information. Hopefully, everyone watching this knows the basic purpose of each branch of the government. The legislative branch, i.e., Congress, makes the laws. The executive branch, or the president, enforces the laws. Meanwhile, the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, is supposed to make sure that both branches play nicely with each other, as well as interpreting the laws and ensuring that they're constitutional. So let's start with the Constitution. From September 1774 to March 1781, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia in Independence Hall to make the framework to govern our country. First, they came up with the Articles of Confederation, but there were some problems. By 1786, the United States money was worthless, and it was defaulting on its debts. We were at war with the pirates of Barbary Coast, and they had even captured one of our ships, and we could not pay the ransom. It's the first war that we were in since being founded, since the Revolution, and it's one that they don't teach us about in school. There's a lot more to that history, but I'm going to skip over that. Feel free to look up Our War with the Pirates of Barbary Coast. I'm sure Wikipedia has information on it, and there's probably books at the library. It's a very interesting situation. In 1787, the Confederation Congress, because we were under the Articles of Confederation, called for a convention of state representatives to discuss revising the Articles. On May 14th, 1787, only delegations from Pennsylvania and Virginia attended the meeting. They had to postpone as there were not enough people for a quorum. On May 25th, representatives from 7 states were present, and they started their meeting. Eventually, 12 of the 13 states were there, with Rhode Island refusing to participate. 2 plans were proposed: the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. The Virginia Plan was accepted, and with some tweaking, became the Constitution. It was signed in September 1787, and then they sent it to each state for ratification. The Constitution contains 7 articles, 1 for each of the 3 branches of government, 1 recognizing state powers. Article 5 contains the procedures to amend the Constitution. Article 6 is on federal powers, and Article 7 has the rules for ratification. In addition to the 7 articles, there are 27 amendments currently, the last one having been added in 1992. So we'll start with Article 1, since starting at the beginning makes sense to me. It discusses the power and authority of the legislative branch, Congress. The article is broken into several sections. Sections 1 through 4 explain the role of Congress, how both houses are organized, and the requirements needed for one to run for election to Congress. Section 5 has some rules for procedures. Section 6 goes over the salary, privileges, and restrictions. Section 7 is on how bills work. Now, Section 8 is what is relevant to this discussion, the powers of Congress. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So, Congress collects its taxes, but the taxes have to be equal throughout the country. You can't charge one state a different rate than another. Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with the Indian tribes, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcy throughout the United States, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting and securities, and current coin of the United States, to establish post offices and post roads, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for a limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries, to constitute tribunal inferior to the Supreme Court, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, to declare war, grant letter of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning capture on land and water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulation of land and naval forces, to provide for the calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing and arming and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may, by cessation of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States and in any department or office thereof. So, that's a lot. But these are the enumerated powers of Congress. Congress has the power to set taxes, declares wars. This includes tariffs, as tariffs are a tax. Now, we've seen the current administration try to claim these powers for themselves. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump's tariffs were illegal, as the presidency does not have that power. And this is also why a lot of people are upset about the Iran war and call it illegal, as Congress has not voted whether or not to go to war. Though, as I'm recording this, there have been calls for a vote on the Congress floor. So by the time this is posted, Congress may or may not have actually voted. Now, Section 9 gives Congress some limitations. And then Section 10 has some rules for states in relationship to Congress. So, that's all of Article 1, all 10 sections. Next article is Article 2, which is about the executive branch. Trump has claimed he has an Article 2 power to do whatever he wants. There's several videos that you can look up. Just look up Trump Article 2. And, I never talk about the Article 2 power, which is I can do whatever I want. It doesn't. Yeah. Article 2 is very specific about what powers the Congress, is about what powers the president does and does not have, and what limitations there are. Section 1 of Article 2 discusses the requirements to become president and vice president, and sets up the hated Electoral College. Section 2 is the powers of the president. Clause 1 of Section 2 states that the president is the commander-in-chief of the military. Clause 2 is the Advice and Consent Clause, which explains that the president can negotiate treaties and nominate people for government roles, but the Senate has to ratify those decisions. It's like, his name escapes me now. Trump nominated someone to take over Tulsi Gabbard's place as Director of National Security, or Director of National Intelligence. And the Senate's like, yeah, no. And he's now pulling that decision. Now, this is the same clause that Alina Habba. He had nominated Alina Habba as U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. And Senate said no, and the courts actually nominated their own U.S. Attorney. Now, while the Constitution does not say that, that discussion of what if the Senate does not nominate or does not approve a nomination had gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had ruled, well, if it gets to that point, the president picks someone, it doesn't fly, and he doesn't pick someone else, then whatever authority can step in. For the case of attorney, the courts can step in and, well, we need an attorney because we can't charge crimes without a U.S. attorney. So that shows, how the three branches work together. But yeah, Clause 2 is the Advice and Consent Clause. Section 3 lists the responsibilities of the President, such as the State of the Union, making recommendations to Congress, calling special emergency sessions of Congress, receiving foreign representatives, faithfully executing the laws, and commissioning officers. Section 4 is the instructions for impeaching the President, which we should go over. Well, I think Congress should go over. And removing them from office. Note in Article 1, there's a long list of powers, very specific powers given to Congress. Article 2 on the President, it's a much shorter list, but it's a longer list of responsibilities. That faithfully executing the laws goes into a lot more detail, and I don't feel like reading it. But I encourage you, get your own Constitution. Feel free to read it. I had one hanging up, but my board fell down and tore the Constitution off, and I just haven't got around to replacing it. But, I will say the Constitution can be a bit of a dense read, as our grammar has changed, our vocabulary has changed over the years. So it doesn't flow like a modern day reading. But the next question is, how does all of this work in practice? Congress passes a tax bill. The IRS is an agency in the executive branch, and they're charged with collecting taxes. So Congress passes the law. The executive branch enforces the law by collecting taxes. Congress has the power to declare war, but the Army works under the President as he's Commander-in-Chief. The President and the State Department negotiate treaties, except for this administration. They suck at that. Then they present these treaties to Congress to vote on. On the other hand, if Congress passes a bill that the President doesn't like, he does have the authority to veto it. There have been lawsuits in the past between the president and Congress, such as the case where Nixon sued over the Presidential Recordings and Materials Act. And then it's up to the Supreme Court to balance things out. And in that specific case, they determined that that act was legal. Well, sorry, not that it was legal, that it was constitutional. The Supreme Court rules on constitutionality, whether or not something is allowed under the Constitution. At least that's how it's supposed to work. Right now, Trump has appointed multiple justices to the Supreme Court, and they rule in his favor about 75% of the time. You know, they have ruled against him on minor things, but the immunity is kind of the big thing. Also, the Republicans control both houses of Congress, and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson seems to do Trump's bidding no matter what. Here's hoping he gets voted out in a few months. Trump has unilaterally taken Congress's power for himself, and no one's been really standing up to him, at least no one with any authority to do it. Mike Johnson blocks any vote to the House floor that would try to take the power back, such as the War Resolutions Act, the War Powers Resolution Act. And the Iran war has exceeded the 60-day limit, which is allowed by, I can't remember what law now, but the president is allowed for limited military actions, which cannot exceed 60 days. I previously thought it was 30, but I looked it up and it's like, oh, it's actually 60. But he thinks, oh, I can just change the name and that counts. Yeah, that's not what the law says. There's tons of other examples I could go into, but it would make this video really long. In closing, if elected, I understand the limits of the presidential powers, and I would respect the Constitution. I understand the need to have friends and colleagues in Congress to push forward bills I want. I would run this country like the Founding Fathers intended. I would show both my branch and the legislative branch the respect it deserves. Congress has their powers. They have their responsibilities. Then they can do their job, and I will do my job, and we'll see if we can get along. Now, since this is the 250th anniversary, if you can, I invite everyone here to pick up a Constitution and read it for themselves, to learn what type of government the Founding Fathers actually set up. And then you can look at the government we have and see if they're doing the job right. I think that as voters, we need to have critical thinking skills, and here's a chance to exercise it. I thank you very much for joining me this week. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, please leave them in the comment below. I am 35 or so episodes in, and ideas still come to me, but not as many as I had in the beginning. But feel free to leave any comments you like. I do reply to comments. Like, share, subscribe. That really helps me out. Get the word out there to everyone. If this is the government, if what I am saying is the government that you want, then share the word so more people can find it. Let's make this, I'm not blue or white, but let's make this a white wave or something. I don't know what color represents me. But thank you for coming, and see you again next week.